Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is Giants of Ancient America. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to join the many others who are supporting the work of Astral Club, you can do so on Patreon. When you join, you get advanced episodes on Sunday, a library of downloaded episodes for your podcast app, and there's a Patreon email, a chat, a direct mail where we can talk back and forth. And if that's something you're interested in, just check the link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like a lesson to learn how to astral project or to improve your current abilities, be glad to work with you. All you have to do is go down to the description section. There's an email there. Just request more information. I've been hearing and interested in at least a casual way about the legends of giants throughout the world. In fact, there isn't any area of the world that doesn't have legends of giants. It's ubiquitous, literally everywhere, from Finland to Australia. You talk to any kind of native population, and you take a look at any legends passed down through the ages, and you will find giants talked about. So, is it true? Were these actual beings? Or are they just some weird psychological something that's stuck in our heads that every human, no matter where they are, comes up with legends? Well, we know in the Hebrew Bible, starting in Genesis 6, that we talk about the Nephilim, which is a Hebrew word meaning giant or fallen ones. And, this was before the legend of Noah's Ark and what have you. And in fact, the legend goes that one of the main reasons why there was this quote unquote flood was to rid the world of these creatures, which, according to legend, were the product of angels who came to earth to watch over mankind, becoming corrupt and mating with human women, giving birth to monsters, giants, men of renown. So the legends are everywhere. And if you come to America, which is what I want to discuss today, you'll find that there are giant legends in tribes like the Osage, the Tuscaroras, the Omahas, the Hurons, and many other native tribes. Usually, if not always, the legends speak of conflict between the giants and the natives. So, they weren't friends. And they appeared very differently from the natives themselves, outside, of course, of being very tall. I decided that I wanted to use astral projection. I wanted to try to project into the past to see if I could locate a giant or two and observe him or her, I don't know, firsthand, and to be able to describe what they look like or if they existed at all. Now, there's two ways you can travel into the past. You can concentrate on a time period, which is what I normally do, or you can try to zone in on a particular person or being. Now, that's a little bit harder. But I think in this case, that's what I have to do. That's what I had to do. Because just picking some time and then trying to fly around, trying to find a giant, because keep in mind, there's some rules. There's a reason why I enjoy going into the future more than the past, even though I'm a historian, I love the past. Is because when you go into the future, you gain more and more power to interact with the physical world. You can be observed by the beings in the physical world, and you can stay there for long periods of time. However, it's the reverse in the past. In the past, you normally can't be seen by humans. and your time there is usually very brief. And you have zero abilities in your astral body to have any effect on the physical world. So I figured what I'm going to do is try to concentrate on the giant idea and see if I could zoom in on that particular type of vibration. Knowing that I have no idea what time period I'll land in because I can't do both. I have to do one or the other. So I'll describe what I see and what I did see as closely as possible. I don't know the exact time period because keep in mind, even if I were to read the minds of the natives, let's say I ran into some native tribe, they don't measure time the way we do. So it would be of zero help. But I decided I was going to give it a try. So I launched myself out of my body and I devoted 100% of my consciousness towards hitting a time stream while concentrating on the subject of giants in America. I lost consciousness, as often happens in long time jumps. And when I came to, I was hovering above the earth, some thousands of feet up, and below me I saw an America that, of course, looked very different than the America of today. There was a lot of forests, and I didn't see, of course, I didn't perceive any large civilizations or roads or anything else. So I assume I went back pretty far in time. But once again, I have no way of knowing. So I descended and continuing to concentrate and zone in on the idea of giants. And I was almost guided at that point. It was as if I was following a scent trail. It's probably the best way I can describe it. And when I finally zoned in, I saw beneath me a giant figure. It was naked. It had semi-European type features, but I wouldn't be able to say completely European. It was semi. The skin was almost like it was like a tough tanned hide. So I would say that maybe naturally the skin would have been pale, but under the sun, it tanned to a leathery consistency. It was carrying a large tree trunk with a huge sharp stone wedged through it and attached with some bindings of sinew. A very primitive weapon. And I can tell you, there's no way I could have even picked it up. I would have had a better chance picking up Thor's hammer than picking up this thing. And what was going on as I was watching is that there was a small group of what I can only assume are Native Americans. They definitely had an Asiatic continence to them, so I'm sure, they are of that stock. They weren't carrying bows and arrows, though. What they had was large spears. So I was thinking perhaps I've gone back so far before the invention of the bow and arrow. Now, I did some research afterwards, and they're able to trace back some instances of bows and arrows being used as far back as 6000 BC. But they weren't really ubiquitous until thousands of years later in the Americas. At any rate, there wasn't any sign of those. They had these very primitive looking types of spears. And they were in combat with this thing. Several of them no longer had spears, and I saw them lying at the giant's foot. And he had crushed them. So evidently, I'm assuming they hit the giant because they weren't that far apart. But it wasn't able to penetrate its skin. Meanwhile, it was swinging this stone hammer back and forth, and the natives were nimbly trying to avoid, getting their heads bashed in. Taking a look at the giant again, I would estimate based on, if I'm assuming the natives were somewhere around like 5'5" type of size, assuming something like that, this giant would have been about 10 foot tall, or about 3 meters for our metric friends. Very tall. Its hair was red. I mean, flame red. And it wore it loosely over its shoulders. And you could tell that, I guess, combs hadn't been invented by these giants, because it was a tangled mess. And he was filthy himself. And so this battle's going back and forth. And finally, I saw the natives retreat. Now, they were wearing various skins that they must have gotten from the local flora and fauna. I don't know whether they look kind of like, I saw buffalo and deer type hides that they were wearing. They took off. They retreated. I guess they just gave up. And the giant, just stood there and watched them as they left. I decided to follow the natives because I didn't know what more I could do with this giant. It's pretty much as I described to you. It seemed like a very powerful being. I tried to do a surface scan, and all I got was violence and hatred. So I withdrew quickly, because you don't understand. When you telepathically scan someone and their mind is simplistic, but it's flooded with negative, violent emotions, it's like an assault. You feel like you just got yourself one heck of a migraine headache. So I pulled back any further. And to be honest with you, with the little taste that I got, I knew already that I wasn't going to gain knowledge of the universe from this creature. So I decided to follow the natives. I thought perhaps I could learn more by scanning them. I flew along with them, and they were, a few miles away from their village. The village was really a very small grouping. There wasn't more really than 10 huts that were nothing more than, I believe that it was just some sort of a wooden structure woven together with furs heaped on top. That was the shelter. Didn't see any teepees or anything like that. And I scanned the warriors as they were coming back, and naturally I sensed residual violence, but not as intense. And of course, disappointment. And I tried to read the thoughts of these natives, and I could tell that they hated, but they feared these giants, that they were an enemy, and that wherever they were found, they tried to attack the natives and vice versa. I even got the disgusting thought that whenever these giants could catch a native unawares, they wouldn't just kill him, they would eat him. So they certainly weren't adverse to what we would consider cannibalism. I knew I didn't have too much more time, so I continued to, I landed and I started walking through the village, just kind of looking into some of the huts. When I came to a central hut, and I just kind of looked in for a second, and something grabbed me. I found myself looking into the eyes of this very old woman. I launched a brief scan of her mind, and then I pulled back quickly because I realized she felt it. She knew I was scanning her, and she addressed me out loud. She saw me. She saw my astral body. That had never happened to me before. I was shocked. She she asked, are you a spirit? And I answered her, you might call me a messenger. And keep in mind, this is all going on in telepathy. She seemed to accept that. She wasn't surprised particularly, and she wasn't frightened, which I would think those reactions would be typical. I asked her how she could see me, and she said she had the sight. And by that, I felt what she meant was she was somehow able. She was a medicine woman, obviously. I don't know what they would have called it, but that's what we would call it. She had the ability to look into the lower astral and to see spirit. And I was part of that lower astral. I asked her, is there anything that I can do for your people? And she said, yes. Is there something you can do? Can you aid us in this fight against these? She didn't use the word giant. Obviously, she didn't use the word giant. It was a word that was something like the evil ones who eat the children. That was the meaning of what she used for these giant creatures. That's the best way I can translate it into English. And once again, it shocked me because the image of children being eaten by these things was grotesque. I thought a moment and I said, perhaps I can aid you. One of my interests some time back was investigating a variety of the wars the United States was involved in. And I also investigated the Vietnam War and all the different battles and the weapons used. And one of the most primitive but effective traps, and 40% of all Americans who were injured or killed in Vietnam were injured based on traps. Now, there was mines and various booby traps, but these things were a little bit more technological. I was trying to think about something that an ancient people could use who didn't have technology. And what I thought of was the punji pit. The punji pit is, well, I'll explain it to you as I explained it to her. I said, what you must do is find a trail that you know the giants traverse. In secret, you must dig a very deep hole. And that hole must be at least 3 to 4 times the size of a man. So it must be very deep. You must then take spears, like the spears you have, carve them as sharp as you can. You then bury the spears halfway into the earth, such that the entire bottom of the trap will have these spears sticking up. Then I said, you must smear the spears with your excrement. I know that's a little gross, but it's also very effective because when Americans fell into these things, or even their foot fell into it and got impaled on these spikes, they wouldn't die from that, but the infection that would occur because of that quite often could, even kill an American soldier. And we have antibiotics. So I assumed that these giants, as strong as they might be, would also be killed by something perhaps an infectious agent like that. And then, of course, a fall onto, a lot of sharpened spears from a good distance would definitely ruin their day, if not kill them. I said, then what you must do is climb out of the pit and take branches with no leaves on them and do a crosshatch pattern so that you now have a frame. And then take branches with leaves on them and throw them on top such that it looks like it's a natural part of the path. Then I said, you must take the finest cuts of meat from a deer, from buffalo, whatever you can hunt, the finest cuts only, and stick them gently in the middle of this trap so that they will be supported by the structure that you have built, but they will not be strong enough to support a giant's weight. So that when the giant, which like I said, based on my scan, didn't seem to be anything near a Rhodes Scholar, would see the meat and would immediately go after it, falling through the structure and then impaling himself upon those points. Now, I know some people might be shocked at my giving them this particular type of weapon, but I felt that I must take sides in this instant, and it was humans versus giants, and I'm a human. And if I'm going to fight for a side, I want it to be the side of humanity. And these creatures did not seem to me to be the type of creatures that I would want to win a war and rule America. And eating small children, sorry, that's where I call time out. That's enough. So I gave her all this information, and she thanked me profusely for this device. And I said, of course, that you and your people are quite welcome. I hope you people will continue now to prosper. And once this giant threat is gone, that you will be able to live in peace as the Great Spirit wishes you to live. I figured I'd throw that in there too. I didn't want them to start thinking about using these weapons against other humans. So I definitely gave her the message that these were for use against giants only, because they were not creatures of the Great Spirit. So that she understood that they weren't to be used against other humans. So as I said, she thanked me, and right about that time, I felt myself being pulled back to the present. So that was my experience with a giant and a Native American tribe going back, I imagine, thousands of years, many thousands of years, because there was no bows and arrows in evidence here. I think that I did right. At any rate, I did what I thought was right and was best to save these peace-loving people, because I could tell at heart they were peace-loving people, but they were being preyed upon by these cannibalistic giants. And so, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Did I do the right thing? Didn't I do the right thing? What would you have done? Do you have any better ideas that you think would have worked better? Let me know. At any rate, this is Rick, and if you like this, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't already, and as I said, let me know what you think. Give me those questions and comments. And as always, I will see you on the astral plane.